There are crimes that linger, ones that stain the pages of history, but some stories, they don't just linger, they scar. This is one of those stories. It was a quiet summer night in the small, idyllic town of Cheshire, Connecticut, the kind of place where neighbors waved from driveways and kids rode bikes freely through sleepy cul-de-sacs. A safe town, a trusting town, the kind of place people move to escape horror, not become its stage. But on July 23, 2007, that illusion of safety shattered. As dawn broke, firefighters responded to what seemed like a routine house fire on Sorghum Mill Drive. But inside the smoke-filled walls of the Petit family home, they found something far worse. 3 bodies, bound, burned, gone. Outside, barely clinging to life, Dr. William Petit, the father, stumbled out of the basement, bloodied and dazed, collapsing onto his neighbor's porch. He had been beaten with a baseball bat and left for dead. He was the sole survivor. What happened inside that house wasn't just a robbery. It was planned, targeted, and prolonged. A 7-hour ordeal. 2 perpetrators, 2 daughters, a mother, and unimaginable horror. They tied us up, they beat us, and then they set the house on fire. Dr. William Petit, survivor. The Petit family was cherished in Cheshire. Dr. Petit was a local hero, a compassionate endocrinologist known for helping diabetic patients long before they could afford care. His wife, Jennifer Hawk Petit, a warm-hearted nurse and survivor of multiple sclerosis. Together they were raising 2 brilliant daughters. Haley Petit, 17, a high school senior with plans to attend Dartmouth College on a full scholarship. mccullar Petit, just 11 years old, a curious and gentle soul who loved cooking and journaling. They were a picture-perfect family, and that picture was violently torn apart. So, what went wrong? Who were the men who brought this nightmare into the Petit's home? Why were the warning signs missed? And how does a town recover when trust dies in the very place it should be strongest? Your own home? This is not just another story about killers in courts. It's about fragile innocence. It's about the thin line between safety and savagery. And it's about how evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it just walks in through an unlocked door. The Untold Trace presents. This is one of the most horrible true crime stories, the Petit family case. A story that shocked America, that changed Connecticut law, that still echoes through the lives it left behind. It started as a quiet summer morning in Connecticut, but by the time the sun rose, 3 members of the Petit family were dead. And what happened inside that house would be remembered as one of the most brutal home invasions in American history. On the outside, it looked like a house fire, but the truth inside was far worse than anyone could imagine. When authorities entered the smoldering home on Sorghum Mill Drive, they weren't prepared for what they found. Jennifer Hawk Petit, the mother, strangled to death. Her 2 daughters, Haley and mccullar, bound to their beds, burned alive. And William Petit, the father, clinging to life after being beaten unconscious with a baseball bat, crawling bloodied to a neighbor's yard for help. What began hours earlier wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a burglary gone wrong. It was planned, it was cruel, and it was relentless. They took their time, they weren't in a hurry. That's what makes it worse. Anonymous investigator. The perpetrators weren't masked strangers. They were 2 recently paroled criminals, men with long rap sheets and no remorse. And from the moment they entered the Petit home, they unleashed hours of horror. They beat William. They tied up the girls. They raped Jennifer. They assaulted mccullar. They forced Jennifer to drive to the bank and withdraw $15,000, all while her family remained hostage. The banker saw the fear in her eyes. She alerted police, but it was already too late. They said if I told anyone, they'd kill my daughters. Jennifer Hawk Petit, in her final recorded words at the bank. By the time officers responded, the house had already been doused in gasoline and set ablaze, with Haley and mccullar still alive, still tied down. When the smoke cleared, the house was a grave, the family was gone, and the town of Cheshire was never the same. We thought we lived in a safe place, but evil found its way in. Cheshire resident. This was no random crime. The house had been targeted. Jennifer had been followed, and the family chosen. This wasn't about money. It was about control, pain, and the slow destruction of a family, 1 hour at a time. I can't describe what I saw that day, but I can tell you, it was pure evil. First responder. In a world full of crime stories, this one stands apart. Not just because of what happened, but how it happened, and how one man survived to tell the world. This is the story of the Petit family, of the night their home turned into a torture chamber, and of how two men, in a single night, left behind a legacy of horror that would echo across America. You're about to enter a case where every detail is more chilling than the last. A story where safety was a lie and kindness became a target. Because monsters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they walk right through the front door. Before the fire, before the terror, before the name Petit became synonymous with tragedy, they were just a family. A kind, well-loved, deeply respected family, living in what felt like the safest town in America. Cheshire, Connecticut, a place where people didn't lock their doors, where neighbors knew each other by name, where summer days were slow, quiet, and predictable. It wasn't the kind of town where anything happened, and that's exactly how the Petits liked it. Dr. William Petit, a physician, known for his gentle nature and deep commitment to his patients. He was the kind of doctor who remembered birthdays and brought lollipops for kids after their checkups. Jennifer Hawk Petit, his wife, a nurse by training, but her full-time job was raising their two daughters and running the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Connecticut. She'd been diagnosed with MS herself, but never let it stop her from living with grace, energy, and compassion. Their daughters, Haley, 17, and Michaela, 11, were the kind of kids you wish lived next door. Haley was tall, athletic, a top student, recently accepted to Dartmouth College. She wanted to follow in her father's footsteps, maybe become a doctor, maybe change the world. Michaela was the artist, quiet, thoughtful, always reading. She kept a journal full of poems and doodles and dreams, far bigger than her small Connecticut world. They were a beautiful family. You'd see them walking their dog, going to church, attending fundraisers. They were loved, local resident. In public, they were respected. In private, they were close. The kind of family that actually enjoyed spending time together. On Sunday, July 22, 2007, the day before the nightmare, they did what families do. They went to church. They had pancakes together. They visited the local grocery store. Michaela even helped her mother pick out ingredients for a pasta dinner. Security cameras at Stop and Shop would later capture them in the aisles, smiling, chatting. The footage is ordinary, unremarkable, haunting. Because what no one knew was that at that exact moment, two strangers were already planning their destruction. One of the men had spotted Jennifer and Michaela at the grocery store. He followed them home. He saw the house. He saw the layout, and he made a decision. He didn't know them. He didn't care. He just picked them, like prey. The Petit family didn't know it, but they'd been marked, and everything after that was just a countdown. The men who would do it, Stephen Hayes and Joshua Komisarjevsky, were both recently paroled from prison. Both had histories of burglaries. Both had been in and out of the system. Both claimed to be non-violent. But this time, it wasn't about stealing. It was about breaking something pure and watching it fall apart. They texted each other throughout the day, discussing the plan, laughing, plotting. "I'm chomping at the bit to get started," Hayes wrote. "We need to calm it down," Komisarjevsky replied. "I'm putting my daughter to bed." Even now, those texts feel impossible. Chilling not just for their content, but for their casual tone. Two men, one house, one family, and a plan that would unfold in the darkness, while the Petits slept under the illusion of safety. There were no alarms, no weapons, no reason to believe they'd ever be targeted, but that night, evil walked through the back door. The attack would begin shortly after 3 a.m., but the clock toward horror started ticking long before. Because this story isn't just about violence, it's about how fragile peace is, about how quickly the fabric of a family, of a community, can be torn apart by two strangers with nothing to lose. In the hours before they died, the Petits were just living, just being. And that's what makes what comes next so unbearable. Because it wasn't just a crime, it was an erasure. Of a family, of innocence, of a town's trust in its own quiet streets. They weren't in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were home, and it didn't save them. It began while the world slept, and it ended in a way no nightmare ever should. July 23, 2007, 3 a.m. The Petit residence, Cheshire, Connecticut. The street was still. Not a dog barked, not a leaf moved. Inside the Petit home, they were asleep. Dr. William Petit dozed on a couch in the sunroom, a habit he'd picked up to stay cool during the humid summer nights. Jennifer, Haley, and Michaela slept upstairs unaware, untroubled, undefended. But the back door wasn't locked. And just past the tree line, two men stood in the shadows. Stephen Hayes and Joshua Komisarjevsky, dressed in black, gloves on, masks ready. They had duct tape, zip ties, gasoline, and a plan. They entered the house through an open screen. No forced entry, no shattered glass, just silence. Their first target, William Petit. Komisarjevsky crept into the sunroom and struck him in the head with a baseball bat. Hard, again, again. Blood pooled beneath his head as they tied him up in the basement. But he was alive, barely. He was bleeding, badly, but he remembered every single thing. Prosecutor Michael Dearington. Next, they turned their attention upstairs. They tied Jennifer to her bed. They tied Haley and Michaela in their own rooms. All three were kept alive, at first. They searched the house. They ate. They rummaged through drawers trying to find money. But they didn't come for money. They came for power. They controlled everything. They were calm, methodical, almost relaxed. As the sun began to rise, Hayes and Komisarjevsky grew more impatient. They needed cash. Jennifer was forced to go to the bank. Hayes drove her in the family car. Michaela was still tied up. Haley, too. Their father lay half-conscious in the basement. At 9:21 a.m., Jennifer walked into the Bank of America branch. She was calm, but her note, passed to the teller, was a cry for help. "My family is being held hostage. They want $15,000. Please don't call the police. They will kill us." Jennifer Hawk Petit. The teller gave her the cash and immediately alerted police, but the response was slow, too slow. Back at the house, the horror escalated. Komisarjevsky sexually assaulted Michaela, the 11-year-old. He later admitted it. He photographed it. It was no longer just a robbery. It was the absolute destruction of innocence. Court testimony. Hayes, upon returning with Jennifer, raped her on the living room floor. Then, he strangled her with his bare hands until she stopped breathing. She died not knowing if her children would survive. And then, gasoline. They doused the house, the rugs, the stairs, the children's beds. They poured it over Michaela and Haley while they were still alive and tied up. Then they set it ablaze. It wasn't just murder. It was torture. It was slow. And it was deliberate. Fire investigator. But one person survived. William Petit, bloodied, broken, but not dead. He regained consciousness in the basement, smelled the smoke, heard the screams, and with whatever strength he had left, he crawled out of the basement and into the backyard. Neighbors found him stumbling across the lawn, barefoot and covered in blood. He cried for help, told them his wife and daughters were still inside. But it was too late. The fire department arrived, so did the police. Inside, they found 3 bodies: Jennifer, Michaela, Haley. Only William survived. Hayes and Komisarjevsky fled in the Petit's car, but were caught minutes later. They'd crashed trying to escape the scene. Police found the girls' remains still tied, charred, fragile, gone. It was over in hours, but the scars would never fade. The house burned down to the frame. Only ashes remained, and questions. Why? Why them? Why so brutal? There are crimes that shake a town, and then there are crimes that shatter the nation. This one, it broke something in everyone who heard it. It was over, but nothing was truly finished. Not for William Petit, not for Cheshire, and not for a nation that had just glimpsed a new level of horror. When the flames finally died down, 3 lives had been taken in one of the most grotesque and senseless crimes in American history. The town of Cheshire was left with a scar so deep, it would take years to speak of it aloud. The aftermath began with disbelief. Neighbors couldn't understand. The news anchors couldn't explain. And William Petit, the lone survivor, could barely stand. "My family is gone. I don't know why I'm here." Dr. William Petit. Days after the attack, he had suffered a skull fracture, broken bones, and unimaginable emotional trauma. But in the weeks that followed, he would become the face of grief and courage. Cheshire, Connecticut, a town once known for quiet streets and community barbecues, became a media war zone. Cameras lined the sidewalks, journalists swarmed the ruins. Everyone wanted answers. How did this happen? Why was no one saved? Could this have been prevented? The Bank of America employees were praised for calling the police immediately, but many questioned why law enforcement waited outside the house for over 30 minutes while the family was inside burning alive. That delay may have cost lives. Civilian protester at town hearing. A debate raged across the country. Tactical protocol versus moral responsibility. Should police have stormed in, or would it have made things worse? The trials. In 2010, Stephen Hayes went on trial first. The courtroom was filled with emotion, gasps, tears, even sobs from jurors. He was found guilty on all 16 counts, including murder, sexual assault, arson, kidnapping, burglary. He was sentenced to death. 1 year later, Joshua Komisarjevsky followed. His trial was even more disturbing. Details of his sexual assault of 11-year-old mccullar emerged. The court saw the photos he took, the journals he kept, the confessions he made. He too was sentenced to death. But in 2015, Connecticut abolished the death penalty. Their sentences were converted to life imprisonment without parole. To many, justice felt incomplete. William Petit did not disappear. Instead, he transformed his grief into action. He founded the Petit Family Foundation, supporting victims of violence, education for women, those living with chronic illnesses, like Jennifer once did. "I don't know why I was spared, but if I'm here, I have to do something." William Petit. Years later, he even entered politics, and in 2016, William Petit was elected to the Connecticut House of Representatives. He served not with rage, but with resolve. The home. The Petit family house was eventually demolished. Nothing was salvaged. In its place, a garden was built, a space for peace, silence, and reflection. Flowers bloom where horror once lived, and people come from miles around to leave candles, teddy bears, and handwritten notes. Public impact. The case sparked national conversations on home security, criminal reform, parole board failures, police standoff protocols. Why were two violent ex-convicts like Hayes and Komisarjevsky allowed to roam free? It was revealed that Komisarjevsky had a long record of home invasions, but had been released early. And Hayes? He had already attempted suicide and confessed violent fantasies. This didn't come out of nowhere. The system knew. Former corrections officer. Their names are now etched into infamy, not just for what they did, but for how many times it could have been stopped. For the Petit family, there are no second chances. Jennifer, Haley, mccullar, gone. Haley was going to Dartmouth. Mccullar wanted to be a vet. Jennifer had just beaten cancer, memorial speaker. They weren't just victims, they were people. And that's what the Untold Trace wants the world to remember. The flames may have faded, but the story of the Petit family continues. In grief, in law, in a garden that now grows where evil once lived. And in every voice that dares to remember. There's something especially terrifying about serial killers. Not just their cold precision or horrific acts, but the way some of them simply disappear. No trial, no justice, no closure, just shadows left behind and a trail of lives forever shattered. Today, we're diving into the twisted realm of unsolved serial killer cases, those that left investigators puzzled, communities haunted, and victims' families with nothing but questions. These are 10 serial killers who committed multiple murders and vanished into the mist of history. Despite years, sometimes decades, of investigations, they were never identified. Their identities remain ghosts in the wind, lurking in the realm of what if. The Zodiac Killer. San Francisco, USA. Arguably the most infamous unsolved serial killer of all time. The Zodiac Killer terrorized Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He claimed responsibility for at least 5 murders, though he boasted in letters to the media that he killed as many as 37 people. His cryptic ciphers, one of which took over 50 years to crack, taunted police and thrilled true crime sleuths for generations. Despite thousands of leads, a list of suspects that includes everyone from disgruntled teachers to secret agents, and even modern DNA testing, the Zodiac was never caught. Was he a brilliant madman? Or just lucky? We may never know. 2. The Servant Girl Annihilator, Austin, Texas, 1885. Before Jack the Ripper, there was the Servant Girl Annihilator. This unknown assailant stalked Austin, Texas in 1885, brutally murdering at least 8 people, mostly servant women, using an axe and often a knife. He moved silently through the city, slipping into homes, leaving behind blood-soaked chaos. What's chilling? Some believe he later moved to London and became Jack the Ripper. While that's still debated, what's certain is that his true identity was never uncovered, making him one of America's earliest serial killers. 3. The Highway of Tears Killers, British Columbia, Canada. Along a desolate stretch of Highway 16, between Prince George and Prince Rupert in British Columbia, lies one of Canada's darkest mysteries. Since the 1970s, dozens of Indigenous women have disappeared or been murdered along this road. While a few suspects were caught for isolated cases, many of the deaths remain unsolved. Authorities believe that more than one serial killer might be involved, predators who use the isolation of the route to target vulnerable victims. The Highway of Tears is not just about mystery, it's about the chilling intersection of race, gender, and neglect. 4. The West Mesa Bone Collector, Albuquerque, New Mexico. In 2009, a woman walking her dog on the outskirts of Albuquerque stumbled upon something horrifying: human bones. Authorities soon discovered the remains of 11 women, all buried in shallow graves on the West Mesa. Most of the victims were involved in sex work and had been missing for years. The killer was methodical, careful, and clearly operating under the radar. The case remains cold. Locals now call the unidentified murderer the West Mesa Bone Collector, a name as haunting as the story itself. 5. Jack the Ripper, London, England. He needs no introduction. Jack the Ripper is the stuff of legend. In 1888, he prowled the fog-drenched alleys of Whitechapel, London, murdering at least 5 women, all sex workers, in gruesome fashion. His killings showed surgical precision. Some believe he may have had medical training. Over 100 suspects have been named, from barbers to royals. And yet, no one was ever definitively identified. The Ripper walked into the mist of history, leaving behind one of the most famous unsolved cases in the world. 6. The Freeway Phantom, Washington, D.C., 1970s. Between 1971 and 1972, an unknown killer abducted and murdered at least 6 African-American girls, aged 10 to 18, around Washington, D.C. The Freeway Phantom, as he was called, left the victims' bodies along highways. In one case, a note was found stuffed into a victim's shoe, allegedly written by the killer himself, mocking the police. Despite multiple suspects over the years, including a gang called the Green Vega Boys, no one was ever charged, and the case remains a chilling stain on the city's history. 7. The Long Island Serial Killer, New York, USA. Also known as the Gilgo Beach Killer, this murderer is believed to have killed 10 to 16 people, mainly sex workers, and dumped their remains along the coast of Long Island. The first remains were found in 2010, but the killings may date back to the early 2000s or earlier. The killer used burner phones and encrypted messages, showing a level of technical sophistication that baffled investigators for years. In 2023, a suspect was finally arrested for a few of the murders, but not all. Many believe there may be more than one killer, or that others are still walking free. 8. The Colonial Parkway Killer, Virginia, USA. From 1986 to 1989, at least 8 people were murdered along the Colonial Parkway in Virginia. The victims were couples, found in or near their vehicles, sometimes staged to look like suicides or accidents. Some were strangled, some stabbed, others shot. Yet the method always had a signature eeriness. No valuables were taken, no signs of robbery, just an apparent obsession with couples parked along secluded roads. Despite FBI involvement, the killer has never been identified. Was it a disgruntled ranger, a former cop, a predator with a twisted pattern? The mystery endures. 9. The Chicago Stranglers, Chicago, Illinois. Since 2001, more than 50 women, mostly black women involved in sex work, have been murdered in Chicago, many found in abandoned buildings, alleys, or dumpsters. Each case had disturbing similarities: strangulation, lack of robbery motive, and the use of body disposal locations far from public view. Despite public outcry, authorities dismissed the idea of a serial killer until data scientists flagged the pattern. To this day, despite growing pressure and extensive data, no official suspect has been named, and the killings remain unsolved. 10. The Phantom Killer, Texarkana, 1946. In the spring of 1946, fear gripped the town of Texarkana. A masked man began attacking couples parked in lovers' lanes. He killed 5 people and seriously wounded others. Dubbed the Phantom Killer, he always struck at night, used a gun, and wore a white mask. One of the most horrifying attacks involved a couple who were brutally beaten. The man killed, and the woman assaulted with the barrel of a weapon. The killer was never caught. The case inspired the cult horror movie The Town That Dreaded Sundown. But behind the pop culture lies real terror, and real families left without answers. Why are some serial killers never caught? With all our advancements in forensic science, why do some of these monsters slip away undetected? Several reasons. Victim selection. Many target vulnerable groups: sex workers, the homeless, minorities, people society often overlooks. Time and resources. Cold cases lose urgency over time. Evidence degrades. Witnesses disappear. Geographic mobility. Some killers move frequently, making it hard to connect the dots. Lack of forensic evidence. No fingerprints, no DNA, just calculated murder. And sometimes, the killer is hiding in plain sight, living a normal life, unsuspected by even their closest friends. The haunting silence. What makes these unsolved cases so chilling isn't just the crimes themselves, it's the absence of answers. What if the Zodiac killer was your neighbor? What if the West Mesa bone collector passed you on the street? What if the Phantom Killer grew old, raised a family, and watched news coverage of his own crimes? These are the questions that keep us up at night. Unsolved serial killer cases are reminders that even in a world of high-tech surveillance and DNA breakthroughs, evil sometimes slips through the cracks. But for every case that remains cold, there's a detective, a journalist, or even an internet sleuth who refuses to let the story end in silence. Because the shadows never forget, and neither do we. Stories like this, they don't just end, they echo across towns, across time, through legislation, memorials, and the lingering ache of loss. It's easy to get lost in the horror, the unimaginable cruelty, the details that disturb, the decisions that still spark debate. But behind the headlines and trials were 3 beautiful lives, and a man who survived what no human being should have to. Jennifer Hawk Petit, mother, nurse, fighter. She had just conquered cancer. Her victory was fresh, radiant, and cruelly cut short. Haley Petit, 17 years old, top of her class, bound for Dartmouth College. She was determined, intelligent, and passionate about helping those with chronic illness. mccullar Petit, 11 years old, bright, artistic. She kept journals filled with love notes and drawings. She cooked for her family. She comforted others. She was, in every sense, still becoming. In death, they became more than victims. They became symbols of community, compassion, and the brutal cost of systemic failure. The Petit family didn't ask to be remembered, but the world remembered them anyway. The Petit Family Foundation was born in the wake of devastation, and yet it thrives on life, raising millions for causes close to their hearts. Education for young women, support for victims of violence, aid for chronic illness. Where brutality tried to silence them, their legacy now speaks louder than ever. William Petit has rebuilt his life, not by forgetting the past, but by honoring it. He remarried, he became a father again, he stepped into public service, not for power, but for purpose. You don't ever move on, you move forward. William Petit. The impact of this case can't be overstated. It rewrote Connecticut's criminal justice policies. It reshaped the way parole boards assess high-risk offenders. And it forced law enforcement across America to re-examine how they handle hostage situations. Yet the question remains, Could any of it bring Jennifer, Haley, or Michaela back? The answer is no, but it can prevent another family from facing the same horror. Across the years, memorials have grown, gardens planted, scholarships awarded, and town halls renamed. Not out of obligation, but out of memory, out of pain, out of love. This isn't just a true crime story, it's a legacy, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, we find light, in action, in remembrance, in choosing to care. As the credits roll, let the images stay with you. A teddy bear at a memorial, a flower blooming where fire once consumed, a father walking forward, not because he wants to, but because he must. In telling their story, we honor it. In remembering the pain, we carry a piece of it. And in sharing it, we promise this must never happen again.